Welcome again to ET 454 Project Management. I'm Dr. James McCurahan. In this lecture, and it's a long one, we're going to discuss predictive waterfall approach for project management. What is predictive waterfall approach? The waterfall methodology is linear and sequential and is often used for projects with predictable outcomes and minimal requirement changes. So, as I'm showing here down below, a basic module involves planning. Lots of planning should be done with the waterfall approach because once you have all the plans together, everything pretty much flows downward to complete the project. So you do the planning, then you do the build or whatever is involved with your project. Then you test the results, make sure what you've built is okay. So in other words, there's a quality aspect to it. You review the entire project and then you deploy it. So not necessarily the best model, but it's just a model that I pulled off the internet and is one of many models reflecting the waterfall approach. When do you use the waterfall approach? When requirements are well defined, the projects with clear, stable, and unchangeable requirements where significant upfront planning is feasible. Has a predictable outcome. For instance, it's often used with building a house, not a cookie cutter, repetitive type of house, but a special house, spec house, in construction management. Okay, there's several variables. You get together the build, you got to get the permits, things like that. You got to get your contractors together, and then as you're going along, there might be slight changes to the plan, but most of the plans pretty much stay straightforward, and you've done it so many times that it's sort of second nature how you're going to build the house. Okay, so it's predictable. Projects with established processes and technologies where the outcome can be accurately estimated. Highly regulated industries where strict documentation and compliance standards are necessary. Some things to remember about the waterfall approach. It has sequential phases. Okay, the project progresses through distinct phases like requirements analysis, design, development, testing, deployment, with each phase needing to be completed before the next phase can begin. Comprehensive upfront planning, as I said before, a significant amount of time is spent at the beginning defining the project, the scope, the requirements, the timelines, and the deliverables. There's clear stakeholder involvement. All the key stakeholders are engaged and during the planning process to ensure everyone aligns with the project goals and outcomes. It's got detailed documentation. Through the documentation, everyone understands what the final project is going to look like, and they understand what the life cycle looks like. Furthermore, with this approach, there's no backtracking. It's pretty much linear process. Okay, if you haven't considered it in the planning process, okay, then you're violating the scope creep, and it becomes an issue with waterfall approach. Now, if this was a phase gate approach or stage gate approach, you would have a quality check at every individual phase before you moved on to the next phase. There's also strict approval phases, and those again act as your gates between the different steps. The advantages to using this approach are several. It's a clear-cut project structure, little room for confusion and deviating outside of the rigorous planning. There's a clear end goal in sight. Costs are pretty much straightforward. In a later lecture, I talk about the different types of contracts that are involved with this. You need to have a pretty good contract with this. Case in point, a family member built a house and they did not negotiate when COVID occurred, and the prices for materials went through the roof, and so that ended up in a legal battle. Okay, next thing, Easier tracking. The progress is easier tracked, has less cross-functional work involved, and Gantt charts are definitely used to keep track of the process. Next, it's a replicable process. As I said before, it's like building a house. You build one house, this process for building another house and another house is the same. You have comprehensive project documentation, you have your blueprints, you have your permitting, you have contracts with contractors, and things of that nature. Other advantages of the waterfall approach has improved risk management. It also has enhanced responsibility in accounting. Teams take up responsibility with each phase. A contractor that's doing plumbing is doing plumbing. An electrician's going to do electrician. Finish carpenter is going to do finish carpentry. Okay, more precise execution for non-expert workforce. So waterfall allows for less experienced team members to plug into the process and to learn from the process and the people involved with it. There's fewer delays because of additional requirements. Since teams know the needs up front, there's less chance of additional asks from the stakeholders or the customers. Some disadvantages of the waterfall approach. It's inflexible to change. There's difficulty adapting mid-project if there's unforeseen requirements or issues occur. There's a late feedback loop. Stakeholders may not see, or even the end product or the end customer may not see what's happened in the later stages, potentially leading to significant rework. Potential for delays. Issues identified in later phases can cause significant project delays. Case in point, family member recently built a house. There was storms that rolled through, and they were significant storms. And this was in the southeast, so they were severe with trees coming down and things like that. It delayed the scheduled end date of completion for the house. 3 principles of the predictive waterfall approach. There's little to no client or stakeholder involvement during the project. It's pretty much clear cut. You've already decided on things. If they get involved, it's going to be minimal involvement. It's a strict and linear project. It's very structured. It must be detailed, so you must have good upfront planning with the project and the project documentation. Over here on the right-hand side, I've just listed again in a different way. I found it. I thought it was appropriate. It looked good. It's a little bit less involved for words. And so if you'd like, just read through the advantages and disadvantages as a summary to what I just talked about. Again, so what are some phases of a waterfall approach? The 5 phases of the waterfall approach has been categorized. It's kind of generic, but I'll go with it. You have the requirements phase, you have design phase, you have implementation and verification, and then the maintenance. And so I'm just showing another example of what is involved with the waterfall planning approach. Again, when to use the waterfall approach: when requirements are known, clear, and fixed. There's no ambiguous requirements. The project's short, environment is stable. You have adequately trained people and available resources, and the tools and techniques are pretty standard and stable. What are the critical aspects for using the waterfall approach? You need to have a project scope. This is one of the most critical documents in your project, and it determines the goals associated with the project. This is information that a project manager and your project team is going to use, so pay careful attention to it because it provides really the basis for doing the waterfall approach. Okay, next, integrate and use project management tools. There's different types of softwares involved with this. For instance, there's something like Excel that can be used. Project Libre can be used. Even Smart Sheets, and there's a whole bunch of other commercial softwares that can be used for keeping track of the project and even doing the project planning. You need to have defined objectives that are associated to tasks. Use a Gantt chart to rough out the phases associated with the completed tasks, and the Gantt chart can be used to identify milestones, major events that occur that you would like to call out and let everybody knows that occurs. Now, with my family building some houses, one of the things that was used by the contractor was they gave videos when they had finished at the end of the week, the end of the day, or some significant event that occurred with the project. So, for instance, we knew when the foundation was laid. We knew when the stick portion was put up of the house. We knew when the heating and air conditioning was put in. We knew when the electrical was put in. We also knew when the lighting fixtures were put in. We knew ahead of time where they were going to be located, because that was at the contract negotiation process. And so those were things that are milestones to let everybody know what's going on. You determine deliverables. You organize and determine and collect tasks to reach the deliverables. Again, those will go on your Gantt chart. Things that are associated with your Gantt chart are going to be the time and the task. Okay, then when you get to further analysis, for instance, if you use something like MS Project, which is another good software to use, there'll be resources attached with that, and then you'll have things like predecessors, and you'll have task dependencies and things like that I'll talk about in a little bit. You're going to outline those dependencies. You'll develop a work breakdown structure. In other words, you're going to create a structure. Now, it may be a small project. You don't necessarily need to use a software like MS Project. Okay, and you can just put that on some type of spreadsheet and create a simple Gantt chart of its own. In the Gantt chart, you'll have the phases, milestones, and deadlines, and then you'll also be concerned with estimated cost and earned value, especially if it's a larger project, and especially if there's a lot of money attached to it. And we'll talk about that a little later. Some more critical aspects of using the waterfall approach is stakeholder expectations. Have accurately aligned. In other words, their expectations need to be accurately aligned with the scope of the project and with the expectations and outcomes. You may want to do interviews to find out what the stakeholders are anticipating as an outcome or the outcomes with the project. You may want to do some research, do some market research, assess the current market, finances, which are a big thing right now, especially with interest rates being elevated. And then you might want to look for unserved niche with your project. Finally, you'll assemble your team, you'll bring resources together, and then you're going to do your kickoff management meeting. So, when you're putting together your project scope, okay, I'm providing an example down here as for a reference to talk about. You may want to use a Moscow method for prioritization purposes. Moscow pretty much means that it defines the must-haves, things you have to have in the project. You have your should-haves. These are things that are essential, but they're not necessarily vital to the end product that you're going to produce. Then you can have your could-haves, and those are things that would be nice to have, but they're really not essential, and they're really not a must-have. And then the things that you won't have, so those are things that are outside of the project. You're saying these are the things we won't have. Here we are going to look at an elaborate project scope statement. So here's an example. Project goals and objectives. The goal is to build a residential construction project. Objectives: to build an apartment complex by 1225, costing less than $5 million, that will generate revenue for the construction firm and later by property management. The requirements: architects, engineers, and construction project managers will work on the construction design, considering customer space requirements, provide unit specifics, and consider the quality standards for the project. customer requirements, location, lot size, square footage, design, interior design essentials, specifications, according to construction drawings and documents such as blueprints and bill of materials, and all developed using computer design software. Quality standards, the local laws and regulations, even external regulations including ISO 9001, 14001, 45000, and 50001. Project scope description. A Gantt chart and the breakdown structure will define the project scope. It is used by the construction management company, specifically the construction foreman, to detail the types of tasks involved, to detail the time, resources, and execution of tasks and resources for permitting and approval, masonry, carpentry, plumbing, and electrical. Further, project exclusions, bidding and operations. These are items or services not included in the bid and hence not covered under the quoted costs. These operations are excluded from the project to include roofing, demolition, anything higher than 7-story construction, residential zoning and permitting, the use of blasting or explosives. The project will be constrained by time. The construction project will start and occur between 11/7/2024 and 3/16/2025. The project is constrained by cost. The project will cost no more than $5,000, yet a fixed price and economic price adjustment contract will be used. The construction may be influenced by weather conditions and supply chain issues, which are not under the control of the construction contractor. Resource constraints, construction materials, including concrete and lumber. Quality constraints. The assigned general contractor will approve all aspects of construction per the contractual agreement. The project scope statement continued. Project assumptions. By the beginning of construction, it is assumed that the construction company has the funds to complete the project or has secured financing. Resource costs will remain stable. There will be no operation delays to the construction, and the cost and timeline targets will be met. Project deliverables include the final build output of the project must be within the scope of the project for a 4 1/2 quarter lot, 10,550 square feet, multiple story build with gas and electric powered for the property units with a parking garage underneath. The output must be the result of deliberate work. At this point in the lecture, I want to expand upon something that is of extreme importance, and that would be the project scope description, task relationships, and their dependencies. A Gantt chart with waterfall approach is critical to describing the project. A Gantt chart is a bar chart. It tells you what has to be done and when it has to be done. The what is on the y-axis, the vertical axis. The when is the x-axis, the horizontal axis. How it's created? You review the scope baseline. You create activities. You sequence the activities. Figure out what goes one after another and the predecessors. You estimate the resources that are going to be needed. You estimate the time durations to complete those tasks within phases. And then you develop the schedule. I'll talk about using MS Project, but a free version similar to MS Project, a software in other words, comes from Project Libre. And you can find it at this web link, just for your reference. What's a work breakdown structure? A work breakdown structure is a hierarchical breakdown of a project into smaller, manageable components or tasks, or even phases. It's a tool in project management to define this project scope and identify all necessary work and facilitate effective planning and resource allocation. A lot of times when you're going to begin doing a work breakdown structure, you kind of want to paint a picture for yourself and break it up. And so what I've provided here on the right side of the screen is for the construction of a house. And so you may have the levels, and these would indicate the phases of what you're going to do for the house. So with this, you have the internal, you have foundation, you have external, and then construction of the home. You want to do your design with your permits, your drawings, then procurement for electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Typically, those are going to be contractors, although within your own construction company, you may have those contractors already in it. Then the construction, and then the inspection of your work. Concerning the project scope description, a work breakdown structure is typically used and can be used. If you notice here on the right side of the screen, we're seeing a work breakdown structure that looks like it's generated by using MS Project. Notice in the first columns that it's talking about the task, and sometimes the tasks are auto-generated to work with each other for the schedule. It's giving a detailed listing of the task, putting a numbering system to it. Then it shows the duty that is going to be performed, or description of what's going to be performed for the task. Has this task start date, has the task end date, also provides with predecessors, things that have to be done, and this lends to task dependencies that I'll talk about on the next slides. Okay, and then it will talk about the resources that are attached to it, or it provides that on the MS Project program. Okay, on the left side of the screen, it's just giving sort of a reference of what's going into this work breakdown structure, and it's showing hierarchical structure for who and what's involved for different phases of the project. And so if you notice here, it's color coded and things of that nature. Here is an example of an actual commercial service work breakdown structure for a waterfall project. Again, my family's built some homes lately, and so I was kind of privy to the software that they were using and asked for a printout so I could investigate it. So what we're seeing here is it's talking about requests for service, when that took part, and it's detailing the phases involved with the construction. And so that's part of what's involved with the work breakdown structure. And so I just wanted you to see what an actual WBS looks like. Here we find an example of a computer-generated Gantt chart. And there's a discussion of the dependencies. But let's notice some first things about this Gantt chart. So we have an ID list, so it's going to tell us what our tasks are. Okay, this is showing you the status of these tasks, for instance, if it's complete, if it's in progress, if it's on hold, if there needs reviewing. There's start and end date, and there's detail of the duration. Generally speaking, these are in days. Again, something like MS Project is easy to use to fulfill the Gantt chart requirement. And notice also that it is giving you a timeline of things that occur. Now notice that it's a waterfall approach, but the waterfall approach is pretty much shown here, but also there is some time in between. Later we'll get to task, or we'll get to slack and float and things of that nature, but this just gives you a general reference. So in terms of task dependency, we have dependencies known as finish to start to start, finish to finish, and then start to finish. And finish to start's relatively easy. Task B can only start when task A has been finished. Start to start. Task B can only start when task A has started. Finish to finish. Task B can only finish when task A has finished. And then start to finish. Task B can only finish when task A has started. So just be aware of these dependencies because they influence the outcome of your project. On this screen, I'm just showing you a highlighted version of what I talked about on the last screen. In this portion of the lecture, I want to talk about costs and resource estimates. And I've provided some links here for you to look at independently of the lecture, and it'll help you out when you are doing your project. So costs and resources estimates used in project management. Several estimation techniques are used in project management. There is parametric estimating using historical data and statistical relationships to estimate costs based on project parameters such as cost per square foot. There is bottom-up estimating. Bottom-up estimating is estimating the cost of each individual task and summing them up to get a total project cost. It's often one of the easiest ways to do it. Next, there's analogous estimating, comparing the current project to a similar project with similar costs to get a rough cost estimate. Under this is single point estimation. That's using the cost of similar projects to provide an estimate, and then a 3-point estimate. 3-point estimate can also be used for time estimates and things like that. It gives an optimistic, most likely, and pessimistic cost estimate for each task involved. The parametric estimating technique. Parametric estimating is a statistics-based technique based on historical data and other variables to calculate the expected financial resources or time that is required to perform and complete a project, an activity, or a portion of a project. Here we're seeing on the right-hand side brief visual showing probabilistic parametric estimating and showing what might be an opportunistic estimate, a pessimistic estimate, and then the most likely estimate, and they're using a bell-shaped curve. Here's an example of parametric estimating technique. It's used to determine the costs using parametric estimating. A project team in a construction company is asked to estimate the construction costs for a new office building. The company has completed several similar projects over the last few years. It uses an in-house database to track the activity durations and costs of previous projects, and it does it systematically. For an initial estimate, the company intends to use the parametric estimation with the building cost per square foot as the relevant input parameter for the parametric estimation. The forecast shall be calculated with the rule of 3. So, for similar type of buildings, the average historical cost for the construction was $200 per square feet. The historical value for new construction was $250 per square foot, and it's projected the new building costs will be $400 per square foot. So the calculation of the order of magnitude of the construction costs using parametric estimates, which is deterministic, is determined on the rule of 3 as follows. Okay, so we have the estimated construction cost for this project, 200 using old historic amount costs, 250 for the historical value of the cost, and then it's estimated $400 square foot for this new project. So using parametric, it's decided that 320 square feet is the best parameter to use. Here we're going to look at the bottom-up estimating technique. This again is for construction costs. Bottom-up estimating involves estimating work and costs at the lowest possible level of detail. These estimates are then aggregated to arrive at summary totals. By building detailed cost and time estimates for a work package, the probability of being able to meet the estimated amounts improves substantially. So looking here to the right on the screen, we're seeing that we have 5 work packages within 2 work phases. And so we estimate the cost of these activities for each individual work package, and then we work upward to get the cost for the project. Showing you at the bottom, here's an estimate, and so we're looking at demolishing pipes and removing leaking pipes in this construction project. Looks like this is only going to cost $500. Then we have installation in phase 1. That's going to cost, after installing new pipes, doing the pipe testing and the installation, it's going to cost about $15,000. And then phase 2 would be a quality assurance, and we do quality inspection, and that's $250. Add all 3 of these together, and it looks like the estimate for this is going to be $15,750. In this example, we're going to take a look at the analogous estimating technique. The example is analogous estimating of a construction project. We take a look at 4 past builds that are similar to the current build. There's Project A, Project B, Project C, Project D. It's determined that Project C is the closest fit to the new project. The historical cost for Project C was $250 per square foot. The new project involves 10,000 square foot building. Thus, the estimated cost will be $250 per square feet times 10,000 square feet to give us an analogous cost of $2.5 million. This method, analogous estimating technique, is quick, and it uses historical cost data to provide consistent estimates, which is helpful for budgeting and planning in large projects. Another estimating technique is the analogous estimating technique, and this is the 3-point estimating technique. A project management technique where the data from similar past projects, analogous estimating, to create a range of possible outcomes for a current project for generating 3 separate estimates: an optimistic estimate, a most likely estimate, and a pessimistic estimate, essentially provide for more detailed picture than a single point estimate. You will likely see some type of estimating technique question on your exams, so you might as well be prepared for it. If you take a look at the formula down here provided, this is called PERT, is Program Evaluation Review Technique. We'll talk about that further later. And so we have O is the value of the optimistic estimate. M is the most likely estimate, but notice you're going to multiply that by a factor of 4 to give it more weighted value. And then you have P, the pessimistic value. And then you make your multiplication here, then add up the O, the M, and the P, and divide by 6. Here's an example from project management where you're considering the early start, the late start, the early finish, and the late finish of an activity, and then sequential activities afterwards, and then contingency activities, things that might be done. So here's where this 3-point estimate may be used. So using the 3-point estimate technique for the project at right, task A's early start time is 0 days, while its late start date is 6 days, and its late finish time is 8 days. If the optimistic start time is 2 days, the most likely start time 4 days, and the late start time is 6 days, how long will it likely take to complete this project? So you put these values into this formula, and you have 2 days for the optimistic start, you have 4 days for the most likely, and then multiply it by 4, and then you have 6 days for the pessimistic start date, and then you divide by 6. When you do the math, you end up getting a value of 4 days. And you can do this for each of these, and it will help you with your planning process. It's also going to help you define what the critical path is later, and we'll talk about that later. What is critical path? Critical path is the longest sequence of dependent tasks within a project, where any delay in any of those tasks directly impacts the overall project completion date, meaning if any task on the critical path is delayed, the entire project will be delayed. This is a crucial definition to understand and actualize, and you'll definitely be tested on this. Most likely you'll see a question related to this on your exam. It outlines the most crucial series of activities that must be completed on time to finish the project according to schedule. Taking a look at the example on the right-hand side, we have 3 paths. We have path 1 that requires 3 days at task A, and it requires 4 days at task G. It takes 7 days to complete this path. Alternately, if we take the second path, it takes 3 days at task A, 2 days at task D, 2 days at task E, and then 1 day at task F, for a total of 8 days. Notice path 3, task B has 4 days, task C has 3 days. Path 2 is the longest path. Therefore, path 2 is the critical path. A to D to E to F, and then finish. So here's how to start with the critical path method, +1 -1 method. Okay, it is a +1 -1 method, and it's the simplest critical path method to use. There's forward pass and backward pass rules, and we'll go through that in a minute. But the first thing you want to do when you use this is you figure out your durations, and notice on the pictures on the left that we have activity A and the duration is 3 for it. There's activity B and the duration is 4 for it. For activity C, the duration is 1. For D, it's 3. And then for E, it is 3. Next thing you want to figure out is your earliest start dates or start times. So with A, the earliest start time is 5 days, and it'll take 3 days to complete it. For B, the earliest start time is 9 days, and it'll take 4 days to complete it. Then we have C, you have the earliest is 8 days with 1 day duration to complete it. D, we have 13 days, and then we have 3 for the duration, and then 16 and 3 for the duration for activity E. So how do we go about getting the values that I discussed on the previous slide presentation? Well, we look at our forward pass rules. So first we have our earliest start time, and our earliest start time is 5. Then we add our duration, which is 3, and then we subtract 1, and that gives us 7. At this point, we're going to take a look at C, just for easy and to get you into the habit of doing this. Okay, so now we look at our early start time, which is the second rule, and it says previous, and that's only if there's a dependency. So in other words, by dependency, I mean if we had B was going to influence C and we had A influencing C, then that's when we would have to consider which of these had the earliest finish time. We'll get back to that though. Okay, so right now we're just going from A to C. So we look at the earliest finish time, which is 7. We add 1, that gives us 8. Then we go back to the formula, and we go our earliest start time is 8 plus our duration minus 1, and that gives us 8. Now let's take a look at B. So we know that the duration there was 4, and then we have an early start time of 9, so we look at forward pass. We have 9 plus 4 is 13 minus 1, and that gives us 12. Now, let's take a look at how we got from B to D. So, we're looking at forward pass rules. Okay, so we have to do a comparison to figure out how this is going to work out here. So, we take a look and we go, what is our highest previous early finish time? So, our highest previous early finish time here is 12. So we take 12 plus 1, and that gives us 13. After that, we can go ahead and go back to the forward pass rules. We'll take our earliest start time plus the duration, we give 13, 13 plus 3 would be 16 minus 1, and that gives us 15. Now, looking at activity E, we have a dependency. E is dependent on C and D. Okay, so we have to do a comparison. So to get our early start time for activity E, we take a look and go, oh, activity C's early finish time is 8. Activity D's early finish time is 15. 15 is the highest, so we're going to use 15 plus 1 and make that 16 for the early start time for activity E. Then we go back to the forward pass rule. We have 16 plus the duration gives us 3, then minus 1, and that gives us the value of 18. Simple enough. So here are the results for early start time, early finish time using the forward pass. So again, for early start time for A, we have 5. 5 plus 3 minus 1 gives us an early finish of 7. Early start time for C equals 8. 8 early start time plus 1 duration minus 1 gives us 8 finish time. For early start for B, we have 9 plus the duration minus 1 gives us a 12 early finish time. Next for D, for early start time for D is 13 because it's you take a comparison between activity A and activity B, and we see that 12 is the highest early start. So we take that value plus 1, and that's how we get our 13 early start time for activity D. Our early start time for D equals 13, and 13 plus 3 duration minus 1 gives us an early finish of 15. Next, we take a look at E. For an early start of E at 16, we take a look at activity C and activity D, and we see that 15 is greater than 8, so we use 15 plus 1, and that gives us an early start date of 16 for activity E. Then for early start date of E of 16, we take 16 of the early start plus the 3 duration minus 1, and that gives us our early finish time of 18. Now we're going to take a look at the backward pass. So we're going to take a look at the rules that are involved with this. The first rule is enter the highest early finish in the last box. Well, we haven't put anything in this value, but here's how we get it. So 18 is the highest value of the last early finish box. So we take 18 and we put it down here, and now our late finish becomes 18. Next, then, we want to follow our rules, and so our rules for our backward pass is we take the late finish, which is 18, we minus the duration, our duration is 3, and then we add 1. So 18 minus 3 is 15, plus 1 gives us 16. So our late finish for activity E is 16, as I've got listed here. Next, we want to take a look at activity C. So we take a look at our values, or at least our rules, I should say, and we look for the late finish rule. It says the lowest previous late start minus 1. Well, our lowest previous was 16. So we take 16, we minus 1, and then we have 15. Okay, so for C, that's how we've got the value of 15, and I've listed it here. Again, we take a look at activity D. We use the same rule. We have 16 from the previous, we minus 1, and for activity D, we get a late finish of 15. Next, going back and taking a look at the late start for activity C, we take 15, and then we subtract 1, and then we add 1, and that gives us a value of 15, which is what I'm showing how we accomplish that right here. Next, taking a look at D, I take the value of 15, I subtract 3 from it, that becomes 12. Then I add back 1, that gives me a value of 13. I'm showing how that formula works right here. Next, we're going to go back up here and we're going to take a look and we're going to say, okay, activity C has a late start of 15, but we also have a dependency here because activity D is also a part of going backwards on this. So we take a look here and we go, okay, so which of these is the lowest previous? And so I'm taking a look right here. This is lowest previous. Well, for us, 13 is lower than 15, so we take 13 and we minus 1, and that's how we get our value for late finish with activity A. And that's what we are showing here with this rule. Then going from 12 minus 3 and then plus 1, so 12 minus 3 would get us 9 plus 1, and that would be 10 for activity A. Looking at activity B, we take 13 minus 1, we get 12 for our late finish. 12 minus 4 would be 9 plus 1, and that gives us a value of 9 for our late start. Taking a look at both activity A and activity B, the late finish for both activity A and activity B is 12. Now, I've provided a link here, and it also gives another example of how to do critical path plus 1 minus 1 method. So make sure you look at it. It'll help you understand it better. And the only way to get good at this is make up your own and then follow the rules, and you'll get good at it, and you'll learn how to memorize the rules, and it goes that much faster. Next, using the critical path plus 1 minus 1 method, we want to take a look at the term called float. Float refers to the time a specific task can be delayed without impacting the overall project completion date. Float acts as a buffer to account for potential delays and allows flexibility in the scheduling tasks within a project. It's sometimes called slack, and it's actually a really simple rule. You just need to remember it. And so the rule for float or slack is the late start minus the early start. So taking a look at our schedule and activity E, notice that we have a late start value of 16. We have an early start value of 16. So we take 16 minus 16 and we get 0. Let's take a look at activity C. We have 15 is our late start. We have 8 as our early start. So 15 minus 8 is 7. Taking a look at activity C, we have 13 for our late start minus 13 for our early start. That comes out to be 0. For activity B, we have 9 for our late start. We have 9 for our early start. That gives us a float value of 0. And then finally, for activity A, we have 10 as our late start. We have 5 as our early start. So 10 minus 5 gives us a float value of 5. What you're seeing here is just a summary in equation form of what I just discussed. Earned value management. Now, I've included earned value management in the waterfall approach, but it also applies to the other approaches as well. But I'm only going to discuss it here, so be sure you take careful note here, and you're going to apply it elsewhere. So, earned value management, what is it? Earned value management is a project management methodology that integrates a project's cost, schedule, and technical scope accomplishments. It's used to measure the project performance by comparing actual results to approved baseline plans. It predicts future performance based on trends. It informs decision-making by highlighting costs and schedule issues early. It's used to evaluate a project state and determine if any action is needed. And it's used for solving problems on the CPM exam and the PMP exam. Notice also on here I've supplied a link, and this link will give you further explanation concerning earned value management. And so what you're seeing here is I've given a listing, and I put this together, and I think it's highly valuable for you to use. And you'll begin to see some trends here with these, okay? And so I'll discuss these a little bit more detail here in a moment. So let's take a look at the formulas for earned value management. The first thing we want to take a look at is our budget at completion. Budget at completion is the sum of planned project costs. When's it best to use? It's best to use before the project begins and at the end of the project. What it says, it's a static value. It tells you how much you will spend or have spent on the entire project. Why you should use it? It's to let them know, the project sponsor and yourself, the project manager, the total amount of value executive management stakeholders are getting for the project. Next, plan value. Plan value equals budget at completion times a percentage of the completed project. When's it best to use? During the project, when a value of the work needs to be assessed for billing purposes. What it says, it's compared to a cost baseline, and it tells you what the project should have spent. Why you should use it? To figure out your plan, what your plan says you have delivered so far versus your baselines. Actual cost. Actual cost is your direct costs, your indirect costs, your fixed costs, your variable costs, and sunken costs. And sunken costs are simply the costs that you have to expend because of errors. Okay. When's it best to use? All during the project, to be considerate of the budget. What it says how much you have actually spent on the project and why you should use it. It gives you actual costs, or what you end up spending, versus the cost baselines. Actual cost includes the cost of materials, labor, and overhead. Then earned value. Earned value is the budget at completion times the percentage of the completed project. When's it best to use? During the project, when a value of the work needs assessed, and again, often for billing. What it says, it's used to compare the cost baseline, and it tells how much of the project you've earned. When you should use it, the earned value lets you translate how much work the project team has finished in dollar values. Next, we have to complete performance index, TCPI. I don't think you'll see this come up during the exam, but there's a possibility that it may come up. So TCPI equals the quantity of budget at completion minus earned value divided by budget at completion minus your actual cost. Again, you can simplify this, but sometimes you need to have these values, and you can take the BAC out of it on both sides and get EV divided by AC. So when's it best to use? Near the end of the project, to let you know what time or cost will be needed to perform to complete the project. What it says, well, it's how well by the percentage of the project must be performed to stay on budget. Why you should use it? To let the project manager and the project sponsor know the cost performance needed in the remaining amount of work to complete the budget. Next, estimate at completion. You may very well see a different combination of these. Okay, so that's why they're all lumped together here. And so let's get started. Estimate at completion equals the budget at completion divided by your cost performance index. When it's used? During the project, anytime. What it says, it estimates the cost to complete the project based on current rate of performance. And why you should use it? It is for forecasting the project's final cost. This formula is most useful after a project has started to determine how much it will actually cost. Then we have EAC equals actual cost plus estimate to completion. Okay, so when's best to use? When doing a bottom-up estimate before, during, or at the end of the project. It says that the individual project works are costing. When you should use it, it's for estimating aspects of the project, labor, resources, expenditures, etc. Now, something to point out here with ECT, the formula for ECT, it's not covered here, but it is more or less EAC minus AC. So if that comes up, at least I've covered it here, and it's a way to figure it out. Okay, another way to look at estimate of completion, it is actual costs plus budgeted costs minus your earned value. When's it best to use? When forecasting during the project. Okay, so oftentimes that's before and even during the project to figure out where you're at and where you need to be toward the end of it. What it says, it's telling the rate of performance according to costs. And then when should you use it? It's used for estimating the rates of aspects of the project. That would be labor, resources, expenditures, and so forth during the project. Also, estimates at completion equals actual costs plus budgeted costs minus earned value divided by your cost performance index times your schedule performance index. That's a big one, and it's complex, but at least you know it exists, the formula. Okay, so when's it best to use? When a precise calculation is needed considering schedule and cost variance. What it says, it gives the clearest picture of the project's performance during the project. When you should use it, this is used when the schedule and cost variance are significantly influenced the project and the significant decisions need to be made about the project. So red flags have come up regarding your schedule and costs, and so we want to be precise, and so we throw all these variables in here and we figure out where we are with your estimate at completion. All right, what you will most likely come across during your exam is SV, SPI, CV, and CPI. One thing to point out here before I get into the explanations are, notice that for SV it equals EV minus PV. Then you go to the performance index. It's nothing more than EV divided by PV. The same thing occurs with cost variance. You have CV, your cost variance, equals earned value minus actual cost. Then for the performance, it's nothing more than EV over AC. Okay, that makes it easy to understand, makes it easy to learn. One of them is just subtraction, the other one's just a ratio. So performance index, if it says index, you know it's a ratio. If it's variance, you know it's earned value minus something. Here's earned value minus something. Well, performance, this is plan value. So your earned value and plan value. When you get to cost variance, it's earned value minus actual costs. Key in the word costs. Okay, variance, planned value goes with the variance. Okay, so when best to use your schedule variance formula to determine when an expected date by work on the schedule misaligns with a planned date. What it says how much ahead or behind the schedule you are. Why you should use this. This puts a dollar value on exactly how far or behind the schedule you are. Schedule performance. It's a ratio of good, bad, or otherwise. Okay? So, it is best to use by determining by percentage how far of the schedule is off. Next, provides a ratio whether you are ahead or behind of schedule, or you can be on schedule if it ends up 0. When to use it? It's used to figure out whether you have delivered the value your schedule said you would deliver. Next, cost variance. Cost variance is earned value minus actual cost. When's it best to use? To determine when a cost misaligns with the planned cost. What it says, it tells you how much ahead or below budget you are. Why you should use it, to let the project sponsor know how much it costs to get the value that needs to be delivered. Then you have the ratio, the cost performance index. That is CPI equals earned value divided by actual costs. When's it best to use to determine the percentage how far off the cost is? What it says, it provides a ratio rather than whether you are within budget or you're not within budget. And why you should use it, to let the project sponsor know cost issues early on, to allow the PM to make decisions for resource allocations to stay on budget. Now, if you notice, I have in yellow here with schedule variance and performance, and I have in yellow here with schedule variance. Okay, some things to point out, at least for schedule variance, cost variance, and schedule performance and cost performance. The greater than and less than values for ratios sort of go together, okay? So if it's greater than here and greater than here, greater than here, greater than here, it's probably a good thing, okay? So here we go. SV greater than 0 when you're doing the performance index. That means the project's ahead of schedule. When the SV is less than 0, it means you're behind schedule. If your SV equals 0, it means you're right on schedule. When you look at your SPI, if the SPI is greater than 1, your project is ahead of schedule. If your SPI is less than 1, you're behind schedule. And if SPI is equal to 1, that means you're right on schedule. Again, with cost variance, if CV is greater than 0, okay, it means you're under budget. If CV is less than 0, it means you're over budget. That's not a good thing. And then if CV equals 0, it means you're pretty much right on budget. Now we get to performance index. Performance index, CV is greater than 1, project's under budget. CPI is less than 1, that means it's under budget. And then you have CPI equals 1, the project is on budget, and the budget money spent is equal to the planned value. Then we have something known as the to complete performance index ratio. Okay, and so I show how it's calculated here, but then I show what the values mean of greater than and less than. So if you have a TCPI greater than 1, the project needs to improve. So it's a little bit different than the other ones. Okay, in this respect, if it's greater, it means it needs to improve. If the TCPI is less than 1, the project's performing better than needed. If the TCPI equals 0, again, like all the other ones, that means we're right on track. So here are some websites you probably ought to investigate while you're studying for the exam. Okay, and these will go over earned value management, and they'll give you a different perspective, a little bit different than what I've provided you. So let's take a look at how we can apply these formulas. So this first example revolves around understanding plan value and budget at completion. Okay, so the first thing that we want to focus on is the formula for plan value. Plan value is BAC times the percentage of completion. And so it makes it fairly simple. We have the example is a project's budget at completion is $120,000. We're 20% on the way of being done with it. So what is the plan value? And easily it makes 120,000 times 20%, and that would be $24,000. Now, this seems very simple, and it is pretty simple, but sometimes it'll throw in different types of formulas, and you only get about 2 minutes at best to figure things out. And sometimes, especially if fatigue kicks in, you might make errors or mistakes or not have the formulas in your head, and you'll encounter problems. Here's another example of a combination formula problem. In this problem, we are using your earned at estimate at completion and your cost performance index ratio. So here's the problem. The project's budget at completion is $120,000. That's what's forecast. Its earned value is $100,000, while the actual cost is $97,000. That's at some point during this project. What's the forecast estimate at completion cost for the project? So we go down here and notice that we have one of the formulas is EAC equals BAC divided by your CPI. Okay, and our CPI value is your earned value divided by your actual cost. So we have $120,000. We have $100,000 divided by $97,000, and so that gives us a value of $116,400. We are forecasting that the budget will come in $3,600 under the forecasted $120,000 for the budget. Here's another example of planned value. Notice the wording. The wording budgeted cost of work scheduled or budgeted cost of work performed. It's word salad for planned value. And here's the scenario. A project takes 1 year to complete and has a budget of $200,000. At the 3-month mark, what is the expected value towards completion? Okay, so this is a planned value and you got to stop and think. Got 1 year and I got 3-month mark. So that would be 25% of the year. Okay, so the formula, planned value, expected completed percentage, divided by 100 times our project budget. So when you put 25% times $200,000, we get $50,000. Here is an earned value scenario. Earned value represents the worth of the work done compared to the planned budget, allowing project managers to assess if the project is on track or falling behind. So the scenario is as follows. We're building a new office wing onto a building. Projected budget is $500,000. Current progress is 30%. So we want to know what the earned value is. Well, considering from last time, 30% times 500,000 gives us $150,000. We looked at the earned value, and again, budget at completion times the percentage, and so this formula works appropriately. Simple enough. Here is a scheduled variance example. A project's planned to have a value of $50,000 worth of work completed by a specified due date. The work completed at some point during the project is only valued at $40,000. What is the schedule variance? So we want to look and think and go, okay, schedule variance. Schedule variance is earned value minus planned value. So simple enough. Go back and look and we go, oh, okay, 50,000 is actually my planned value, even though it's in front, okay? And then earned value, even though it's after the planned value, so we got to stop and think. Schedule variance equals earned value minus planned value. So it's $40,000 minus $10,000. So our schedule variance is bad at a negative $10,000. Here is a schedule performance index example. A project is planned to have a value of $50,000 of work. That's planned value, and that's by a specific date. The work completed at some point during the project is only $40,000 earned value. What's the schedule performance? Now, if you stop and think, and this comes up, you know, you did the other one, okay, schedule, blah, 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 variance. Here we are, schedule performance index. One is a minus, and the other one is a ratio. So we got to look and go, okay, ratio. Our ratio here is earned value divided by plan value. So 40,000 divided by 50,000 is 80%. So an SPI of 1, if we go down here and look, SPI of less than 1, that's bad. That means that the project is behind schedule by about 25%. It is a less than value. Okay, so moving on. Again, here is a word salad problem. Okay, using different wording, but it's all related to a common variable here. Okay, so to be calculated as the difference between budget cost for work performed, BCWP, and the actual cost of work performed. It's cost variance. That's what we're looking for here. So 50% of a project is completed. The budget has spent $5,000 of budget within a 3-week completion time. $2,750 has been spent so far. So what is the cost variance? Well, we go to EV and we look at EV. Here's EV, and that is budget at completion times your percentage. So our budget at completion is $50,000 times the percentage gives us $250,000. That is our earned value. Our actual cost is $2,750. So our cost variance is $2,500 minus $2,750. We have a negative value for cost variance. Here's another word salad scenario, okay, with terminology for these formulas. The terminology here is actual cost of work performed. There's really no calculation for actual cost of work performed. It's just, again, it's word salad. It's going, okay, here's what is cost at this point for what we have done. So example, if a project has completed 50% of its work and $75,000 has been spent on labor, materials, and other costs, then the ACWP is $75,000. Simple enough. Here's an example of a cost performance index problem. 50% of the project is completed. The project has a $5,000 budget and it's to be completed within 3 weeks. $2,750 has been spent so far. So what is the cost performance index? Well, we look at the earned value, and that's 50% times $5,000. That gives us $2,500. The cost, what's actually been spent, is $2,750. So our CPI, and we look down here, here's EV divided by AC. We have 2,500 divided by 2,750. That gives us 90.9%. So 0.99 is less than 1. So with a CPI of less than 1, the project is over budget by about 10%. So this is just an example where you need to stop and think about what's being asked of you and in terms of consideration of other problems. Now let's take a look at to complete performance index. Okay, here's a reminder. It is used to it's a calculated metric that shows the level of cost performance for a project for what it must achieve on the remaining work to reach a specified goal, like the project's budget at completion or estimate at completion. So here's the scenario. The project budget is $1 million. As the project progresses, an earned value of $450,000 has been accrued, while the actual costs are $600,000. Okay, so $450,000, but we've actually spent $600,000. So there's a ratio right there. What is the CPI for the project at this point? What is the TCPI for the project? So here's a combination. Answer, the CPI is 0.75, okay, 450 divided by 600, and it's over budget. How much? $150,000. The TCPI then, so we take a look at our formulas down here, okay, The TCPI is 1.375, or about 38% over budget towards the end of the project. Finally, for this slide, I've just provided it here so you can take a screenshot or what have you, and then print it off so you have it as a quick reference. So that's why I've provided it. And with that, we're at the end of the lecture. And by the end of the lecture, you should know the 5 phases of the waterfall approach, key aspects and points to the waterfall approach, the advantages and disadvantages of the waterfall approach, and terminology that goes with the waterfall approach, types of dependencies, types of the task dependencies, the critical path method, at least +1, -1, and then how to use the formulas for earned value management. With that said, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next lecture.